All right, the next item up is multi-year budget forecast. That was sent out in our packet. Does anybody, you can see the next 3 years in front of you, the expected revenues and the expected expenditures. The assumptions within those are you're going to have 2.5% average increase in assessed values and a 3 mil increase each of the next 3 years. So it's as rosy a presumption that you can have. This year, at the end of the year, we'll end up with a little over $20 million added to the reserve fund, so we'll be closer to $90 million in reserve, or at least that's where we're tracking right this minute. And again, key items is, when you get our assessed value increases in Charleston County, people's property getting more value has saved us this year and last year. That and lapsed salaries have saved us. So this is assuming that continues, but if you look again 2 and 3 years out, our expenses are going to outpace our potential revenue to be able to pay for them. So there's a budget deficit 2 years out and then 3 years out.
And so there's only 2 3 mil increases in the 5-year projection.
This is a 3-year projection, and it's assuming, yes, each of the 3 years.
So it's assuming 3 tax increases in 3 years.
Yes. So minus that, and you start deficits earlier.
Right. So when do we hit our cap to be able to raise millage?
Those are the estimated. Obviously, we don't know.
I thought there was a
ahead of
very
time.
big conversation at the last board meeting where we were talking about
There
the fear
is,
that
let
we're
me
getting
explain.
very close.
There's Act 388 explains exactly what we can do. We can grow our millage by
We have the 8% cap.
this different pot of money, by our percentage increase in students plus inflation, which has averaged about 2.97% annually over the last, say, since 2007. So this is assuming that it stays on par for the next 3 years to have more or less 3% increases in taxes.
Do we have the ability to unlimited raise millage, or do we have a cap on the millage we can raise?
There's a cap.
We have a
Absolute
cap on the
That was
millage we
17%,
can
wasn't
raise,
it?
so my question goes back to my first question. Are we getting close to the point where we're not going to be able to raise millage?
Next 5 years, probably.
Because I think that's something we need to make sure the legislatures are aware of. If we're hitting our cap and the funding stream doesn't work, we don't have any other options. And this is proposing raises.
Well, this is proposing raises, and we're still out of revenue in
Right,
year
and
2.
at some point, we don't have the ability to raise taxes. We don't have that independent option.
Well, as Mr. Garrett indicated, the state tells us each year what our allowable millage increase is. In these assumptions here, we assume, as he indicated, 3%. That's the average of the last 3 years. Actually, the last 3 years, 3.16%, so we're right at the average.
You don't see that diminishing?
Well, so our assessed values, as he also indicated, are continuing to rise. I think where I see as the biggest problem is that had we not had the limitations on Act 388 for this current fiscal year, we could have increased revenue up to, not saying we would have, but up to an additional $61 million.
No. If we hadn't had Act 388, we wouldn't have had to raise the taxes to get that. It would have been in the
Correct.
revenue stream. I want to make sure the public hears that. We
Got it.
have to make sure we say this where people understand it. We wouldn't have been able to raise our taxes had it not
so
been
you
for
can
Act 388. That would have been money generated for the school district,
That is correct.
not us. Because I think that's where people are getting confused between the cap. They think there's a cap and we can raise taxes as we want. So we need to be very clear that Act 388 is putting a huge constraint on our ability to fund.
That is correct. In the conversation that the academic team had earlier this afternoon around the middle school offerings, as an example, the ability to do that, those types of things are constrained by the Act 388 restrictions.
All right, what questions does anybody have on there?
Just to be clear, this is not the proposed 20 budget dollars, or is it
No, this is just this is not proposed budget dollars. This is,
for next year?
and this has no, this is just assuming a standard increase in our expenses. Or assuming that everybody's hired next year, and this is sort of what we're,
Just don't want people walking out and saying, here's your budget dollars for next year.
no, yep. This is just an information item. All right, here are no other questions, then the Audit and Finance Committee and the Committee of the Whole are adjourned. Back on my page, I apologize. Kronos update, Mr. Kennedy.
Oh, thank you. So as the board is aware, back in April, the State Department, actually the Secretary of Education for the state, indicated that we were not compliant and that we were being put on financial watch if we were not, we did not come into compliance with the Kronos timekeeping requirements. It's something that our external auditors have pointed out as a material weakness, at least for the last 3 years. When Clifton Larson Allen briefed the board last month on financial statements from fiscal year 18, they presented a material weakness again, recurrence of the non-compliance with the Kronos. And so what we proposed to the Audit and Finance Committee, or to the Audit and Finance Committee earlier this month, is a progressive discipline program to ensure that our employees take the compliance issues seriously. Just on the metrics here on the second page of the document, it shows that when we first started taking a look at this problem back in the spring, back in May, June timeframe, we had both employees and supervisors, roughly 800 per week that were not complying with the approvals. As the graph at the bottom shows, since then we've decreased that to around 200 or so employees and supervisors. So the trend is going in the right direction. However, it's flattened out, and so the program on the progressive discipline is to address the remaining persistent lack of noncompliance.
What questions?
I have a question. So in reading the background and discussion in the letter, it looks like we're following up on some kind of discipline for employees who are either missing a punch or not approving theirs. What about, and I may just have missed it, what about the supervisors who are not approving let's say their employees have done everything correctly, but the supervisor's not doing their part?
Yeah, so the focus that I have right now and the team has is actually on the supervisors, because if we can get that resolved, I feel very strongly that the employee piece will happen, yes.
Yeah, that's what, bothers me if the supervisors aren't. Okay, that was my only question.
What other
But you
questions?
don't, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
You don't have a separate policy a different policy for supervisors and employees?
The
or you do?
The policy is the same.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
What offense are we at? What offense? With a background discussion? There's five offenses. Have we hit the first one yet, or where are we? Or is each person given an offense?
Yeah, each person.
So it's each person, and the intent is to, we will have various reporting periods. The first reporting period is January 1 through June 30, so the end of the second half of the fiscal year. And so those offenses then apply on individuals within that reporting period.
Do we give our students 5 chances?
That was a rhetorical question.
No, it wasn't.
I thought
Being
the same
serious.
thing. I actually thought the same thing.
I mean, we're giving adults 5
These are
chances to
adults
do
who
what
have
they know they're
jobs.
supposed to do. And we don't give children the same concession, which seems really interesting to me.
Have you Mr. Kenny, have you started, this goes on with what Michael said, have you started these offenses already with the employees, with the supervisors?
They start 1 January.
Okay, 1 January, sorry, I missed that, okay.
Well, and the other thing I would just possibly ask you to consider, obviously, would be that you hold supervisors in higher regard than employees because you've given them more responsibility. So should they also have the same offenses as an employee? I mean, because you're paying them more, you follow what I'm saying? I don't need to.
And I
okay.
think what
would
Ms.
just
Joyce
say-
mentioned
I
at the
would
last
just say
meeting.
Consider, you might want to, that may be something you want to look at and consider.
Yeah, and I think what you were specific about is we would like to see that tied to their performance reviews. These are people not making sure key parts of their job are done, and it's having no effect on their raises and promotions.
Right, okay.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, then we'll adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
I didn't think.